Raheem Morris was 8-9 in his first year as the Falcons head coach. The season started with intrigue and questions after Kirk Cousins signed a 4-year, $180 million contract. The contract essentially made Cousins uncuttable as dead cap value, and it would be $75 million this year if the Falcons were to cut him. He's coming off an Achilles injury into this, was playing well for the Vikings, although they had a .500 record when he did pop his Achilles. 43 days later, in the 2024 draft, the Falcons were on the clock and made a very questionable move of selecting a quarterback with the 8th pick in the draft. They signed an aging veteran to a 4-year contract worth $45 million a year and then draft a rookie in the top 4 and sign him to a 4-year contract. And my ending to that paragraph is the Falcons are going to Falcon. If you want to pull up those recent moves for the Falcons. So the team is immediately under fire after Cousins' terrible week 1 against the Steelers, where they lose a game where the Steelers' only points were off field goals. They make 6 field goals, and they lose game 1 of the season. And then in week 2, they have an iconic comeback against the Eagles on Monday Night Football, beating the eventual Super Bowl champions. Kirk would lead 2 more iconic comebacks and game-winning drives before losing 4 games in a row and being benched for Penix in Week 16. Penix was 1-2 in his starts, losing the last 2 weeks of the season in overtime, and the Falcons missed the playoffs. Going into this season, it's clear Penix is going to be the starter, but what is not clear is the status of Cousins. Reporting right now indicates it's way more likely he stays with the team all season, potentially even earning the starting job back if Penix were to play poorly. What cannot be overstated, though, is the need for the Falcons and realistically every team in the NFC South to win their division this year, given how poor the division is and given the contract situations in Atlanta. You got to go out there and win the division this year. That's the expectation for every team, more or less. The Saints and Panthers less, but the Buccaneers and Falcons, the expectation is to win the division and host a playoff game. The draft was a fun night for both us and for the Atlanta Falcons and our Atlanta Falcons fan, Thomas Mickle. Jalen Walker fell out of the top 10 and into the laps at 15. And then the Falcons traded back into the first round to select James Pierce, giving up their second-round pick and their first-round pick this next year, which, if it works, it's a very successful trade. But if the Falcons are bad this year, they do not have the backup of their first-round pick, which is why I say this is a must-win year for the Falcons. So the first question is, what were y'all's reactions, and how do you feel now to, one, the drafting of Michael Penix and the experiment that was last year with Kirk and Michael, and then the selection of James Pierce, trading back into the first round and giving up a first-round pick?
Sure.
How do you feel about those moves? Because that's kind of my first lead-in, and that's the big questions in Atlanta is those moves, and then just cutting Grady Jarrett, your best defensive player. It's been a lot of question about the front office and Arthur Blank this offseason.
Yeah, so first with the Michael Penix thing, I'm probably the biggest Penix guy you'll find. I love him. I'm a big believer, both in terms of, like, I think he can be good, but also just, like, sometimes you love a player even if they aren't good, right? So I love that they have him. Now, it made no sense to draft him if you sign Kirk Cousins. I don't think you're going to find anybody that argues it does. Just in that soon of a window, I don't, like, it's contradictory, right? Because you pay a guy like you trust him, and then 45 days later, whatever it was, 40 days later, you're drafting guys. So it's like, hey, you don't trust him. It kind of seems like they were right not to trust that he was going to perform. I don't really think he was all that great last season.
Cousins was not.
Just kind of clearly on decline. He's an older guy. How old is he?
36.
36. He'll be 37.
36, coming off a popped Achilles. I feel like his mobility was down in terms of in the pocket. And so it kind of worked out in the sense of you had Penix as this fallback guy, but then you just ask the question, why did you ever sign Kirk Cousins in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the James Pierce trade back in, I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan. I get trying to go all in a weaker division. It's almost like talking about the Eastern Conference in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
Like, you see an opportunity and you try and jump on it. But I'm just not the biggest fan of trading a first-round pick in next year's draft to go do that.
Especially to select an edge rusher and not like a quarterback. Or
Correct.
anything like that.
Quarterback, different scenario. There's also a lot of people have questions about James Pierce. It's not a guarantee that he's. It's not like they drafted a home run prospect, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
So you said Falcons are going to Falcon, and that does feel how it is in terms of just like bird brain moves, I guess.
Yes.
I will also speak to both those things. The Kirk Cousins move, bringing him in was the right decision, but now in hindsight, drafting Michael Penix was also the right decision, in my opinion. Penix he did have 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in his 3 starts. However, 2 of the interceptions were not his fault. I don't know if you remember those plays, but 2 of them were literally hit the wide receiver in the hands, and then the ball just popped out and was intercepted. So he played decent to good in his 3 starts, went 1-2 with the 2 overtime losses. So I expect him to be good going forward. You brought in Kirk Cousins thinking he was going to be the guy. I don't necessarily, now that we know, like we kind of know now he's not going to be the guy. I'm honestly, if I were a Falcons fan, I feel like I'd be grateful that we drafted Penix and just be ready to just like move on.
Well, they are, but here's the thing. You don't pay a guy the kind of money you paid Kirk Cousins off of hope.
Yeah.
Right? You pay that kind of money to a guy like as a sure thing, right?
Yeah.
But if you're like they did it off of hope that he was going to be good and now they know he's not. That's just kind of like I think it's a dumb move. And you can say, "Oh, hindsight." But like I think at the time everyone was really worried about it and then it got amplified by the drafting of Penix.
Yeah.
So,
and then I like James Pierce. And also I disagree. I do think a first-round pick depending on what your expectations for next season are, the Falcons clearly think they're going to be good next season, which means that their first-round pick will be outside of the top half of the draft, which does impact where that trade, what that trade looks like. I don't hate it. As far as edge rushers go, I believe they're the 3rd most important position in football as far as impact of the game, and then also salary-wise. So you're getting the most benefit by having a young rookie salary edge rusher as opposed to bringing in a veteran in free agency. It's the most.
Sure.
It's the 3rd most bang for your buck, I believe, behind quarterback and wide receiver. So I really don't hate that. I like James Pierce. He's very talented. I feel like most of his issues were off the field stuff.
Yeah.
Which there's still issues, but they brought in a talented guy. So I do like the trade. If it doesn't work, and then hindsight will be like, well, that was a bad trade. But if it does work, it could be really, really good, and they could have a really good guy in James Pierce.
Yeah, they attacked the draft filling the holes that they lost. Their offseason losses, the big ones, Grady Jarrett, Matthew Judon, Justin Simmons, 2 pass rushers and a safety. They draft Jalen Walker, James Pierce Jr., Xavier Watts, 2 pass rushers and a safety. So well done there. And then bringing in Leonard Floyd as well with Morgan Fox helps the defensive line. That was a big question for them last year, and it was a downside to that team. They were awful on the defensive line. They were the 2nd worst team in terms of sack percentage. They just were not a team that could ever get to the quarterback. And that's why there was a huge outrage when they let Grady Jarrett go, is because who was going to rush the quarterback now? Now Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. will have to fill that role almost immediately for them, and they are their pass rushers on that team. For the rest of the team, I want to talk more so positively about the Falcons before then we get into predicting how their season goes. One of my favorite players on the team, Bijan Robinson, or Bijan Robinson, however you want to say it. There's no argument that this guy's already a star. 3rd last season in rushing yards, 5th in rushing touchdowns. There was definitely frustration with fantasy owners last season. Algier ran for 650 yards and 3 touchdowns. It felt like he was taking his volume, Bijan's that is. Stats don't necessarily say that, Bijan was still 5th in attempts per game and 3rd on the team in receptions per game. So he's still getting the touches, even though it didn't feel that way. He wasn't getting a ton of the goal line snaps. The Falcons are going to get 2 more years with him on a rookie contract, so this kind of feels like, again, a pivotal year for them to solidify him as a top 5 back in the league, and pivotal for him as well.
Has he already played 3 years?
He's played 2 seasons, so he's got 2 more seasons on his rookie deal.
No, they got the 5th year. It'll be 3.
Okay, well, the 5th-year option is still expensive.
Yeah, true.
And
Continue.
Yeah, the 5th-year option is more expensive than it's usually almost as expensive as the entire contract combined.
Yeah.
running backs are becoming more valuable, and at least the perception is becoming a lot better as well after terrific years from guys like Saquon, Josh Jacobs, and Derrick Henry. And so my question to y'all is Bijan, is this the level he's at? He was third last season in rushing yards. He had almost 1,500 yards on the ground, which is amazing. But is there another step that this guy can take? And Jack, I know this is going to hurt talking positively about a Longhorn, but please do right now.
Yeah, and I'll put my biases aside, I guess, because I do think there's another level he can get to. I think he has all the tools. Just a lot of it to kind of hit the next year is honestly team dependent, I feel like.
Yeah.
You have to find your way into the right system with a great run game and just a good offense overall. But he's fantastic, and especially the pass catching ability he has to kind of complement the kind of rushing prowess he has, I guess. Is just I don't see any reason that he couldn't have a year where he is the best running back in the league.
Yeah, Sanders?
Yeah, I would agree. I would with what Jack said is really important, and I have talked about this during mock draft season. I tried to emphasize how important it is to running back to beat like what team they're on. So I think what Jack said, however Bijan progresses will be entirely offensive line and scheme dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that goes. I'm kind of excited to see how this offensive line goes. They've got a really good guard in Chris Lindstrom. Center could be an issue, but we'll see. And also, they are kind of blessed. They've got a pretty good pass game. And I expect it to get better. Should be better with Penix. And then you've also got Drake London and Darnell Mooney. Breakout season for Kyle Pitts incoming, potentially. So I do expect that pass game to be a good pass game, which will hopefully take some of the stress and pressure off of that offensive line by forcing defensives to cover a little bit.
Yeah, if there was anything the Falcons were good at last year, it was offensively. They were fifth in passing yards per game. With the weapons that they have, it's almost like impossible to not be good and productive in the passing game, and they were that. Getting into them in terms of how they're going to look this season, see, Jack, you've got them at 11-6. Our resident Falcons fan, Thomas Mickle, also has them at 11-6, and I want to bring up a graphic. If you can go ahead and bring that up, Sanders. So, since the year after they won the Super Bowl, 28-3, they didn't win crap. The year after that, since then, on the right, you can see their preseason odds. Those are all plus money. None of them favored outright, but one year they were favored to win the division. That was last year. And then on the left, you'll see their record and also where they finished in division. And as you can see, there hasn't been a single year where they have improved on their preseason odds with their final record. They have been even in some cases, twice, or 3 times, I should say. 4 times, I should say. My apologies. But they've never improved on their preseason odds. And this season, they are the second favorite in the division. So, Jack, tell me why the Falcons are going to win the division and break this this stat that is basically undeniable.
First question, what's their odds for the upcoming season?
They're second in the division,
okay.
And they are.
I figured they'd be behind the Bucks.
Not too far behind the Bucks.
Okay. I mean,
hold on, I can tell you. I've got it right here.
Well, I mean, as far as, for the stat, as long as they're second is what really matters for the trend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it comes down to simply this. Michael Penix, dude's been a winner and kind of everywhere he's gone, from the great shortened season Indiana, then, ends up at Washington and leads them to the championship game against Michigan. I almost said Georgia, but Michigan. Now it didn't go his way, but I just think he's a dog. Love him a lot more than Kirk Cousins. I think he's someone a team can kind of rally behind and gain momentum behind. So a lot of this, I will say, is like a heart pick. But also there is I legitimately believe everything I said. I think he can be that guy for this team to kind of get them over this little hump of just kind of underperforming seasons.
Yeah, you have them at 11-6. Their Vegas win total 7.5.
Definitely very high.
I also want to point out one thing in your graphic, or not your graphic, but your picks that is actually physically impossible as well.
Sweeping the Saints?
The Falcons have not swept the Saints in a season since 2016-2017, the year they were up 28-3 on Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. So tell me why they're going to sweep the Saints, because that hasn't happened since the year they went to the Super Bowl. So then I guess if they're going to sweep the Saints, tell me why they're going to be in the Super Bowl.
Well, I don't think they're going to be in the Super Bowl.
Well, you're saying that.
That's not like a
I do
one-to-one
think that
thing.
they probably swept the Saints and not made it to the Super Bowl before.
Yeah, but this is
You're talking about recent
it's my
trends.
stat. If you want to give me a different stat, feel free. But this is my stat.
Just kind of want to throw a little bit of a jab at you, to be honest, as the resident Saints fan. And I legitimately think something that could happen. I think there's a world where the Saints end up in a spot. I don't really want to get, I guess, into the Saints too much, but where they're just end up kind of like looking towards next season. I mean, the QB, who's going to start for the Saints currently?
Right now, in-house, there's no clue. It's a 50-50 between Rattler and Shuck. Outside of house, Rattler is the favorite, 60-40.
Okay. Well, it's just not a great spot to be QB room-wise, I guess. But yeah, that's what I have them going 11-6. It's a high prediction. Like you said, the line is 7.5.
You also have them beating the Buffalo Bills.
Well, I mean, things happen in the NFL.
Yeah, like you can if you
I
made
know.
yeah.
I was just pointing that out as well.
Some of it too was like
You're gonna get crap for that when you make this TikTok.
that's fine. The
He's
Bills
ready for
fans
it.
bring it on. You can kind of go like I've been predicting all these teams to play Buffalo, and I keep on having Buffalo beat everyone, and it was almost like
Buffalo's
down the
gotta lose a
line,
game.
Buffalo's gonna lose a couple games, unless you're Buffalo. You think they're gonna go 17
there's a
and 0.
stat for you haven't seen a team go undefeated in the regular season since 2015. I mean, that's even older than your stats.
But yeah, I'm high on them. I also had
Fair,
a little Falcons love, I guess. Love is strong, but like I'm a huge Braves fan, right? So like, I know a lot of people that then they're also Falcons fans. I wouldn't mind the Falcons being successful.
Sure. I'm just gonna tell you outright. That's not gonna happen. They're not gonna win 11 games.
Okay.
I'm not just saying that because of the stuff right in front of me, but I was a Falcons season ticket holder in the Georgia Dome.
Yeah.
Throughout my childhood, I know what it's like to cheer for the Falcons, sit next to Falcons fans, all of the above. I've seen them choke a lead in the NFC Championship against Colin Kaepernick and miss the Super Bowl. So I understand the Falcons' pulse. I understand that city and that fan base because it's a completely different fan base than it is compared to the Braves, to the Hawks. It's a lot more of the Southern Atlanta fan base. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, they're not going to 11-6. The Falcons are going to Falcon. At best, they'll be a 9-win team, maybe. But the key with the Falcons, and it's you can compare it to almost any of your favorite teams in general. They're never going to perform to your expectations or even above your expectations. They're always going to be like maybe just barely meet your expectations, if not below. That is kind of how the Falcons roll. That's how that organization rolls. So I'm telling you right now, they're going 7-10 for me. The schedule is really difficult. Like their 7 losses are not even like insane ones. Minnesota, losing at Carolina, there's argument there, sure. Losing to Washington, Buffalo, at San Francisco, at New England, which a lot of people think New England's going to be good this year, and that's also at New England. They're guaranteed to lose to the Saints once. That's kind of how that math works out, unless you want to say they're in the Super Bowl. Losing at the New York Jets late in the year, losing at Tampa Bay, and then, which I'll get into that stat, why that's more than likely going to happen later, and then they lose to the Rams at home. So 7-10 for me, just under their win total. I have them not making the playoffs, obviously, 3rd in their division, because you can't really counteract the argument that they don't finish better than what their preseason odds are, because the stats don't lie. That's 7 straight years.
Michael Penix is good enough to buck trends.
He was 1-2, so
3 games, tiny sample size.
sure.
Sanders,
Let's move
give
on.
us your prediction.
Oh, my prediction?
You just,
I
you're just
forgot.
ready to swap teams. He's
I'm
trying
ready
to
to
get
move on.
bullied
We've
for
been
his
ta-
predictions.
No,
He's
I'm-
just trying to slide on by.
We've just been talking
You
about
have them at 8-9. You
Yeah.
have them losing to the Saints twice, so go ahead.
I do really like what this offense sets up to be, but I do think they've got some tough games on their schedule. I do not have them beating Buffalo. But I do think they're going to be a decent team. I'm kind of falling into this. I kind of want to do the rest of my projections for the all the teams just to be sure I don't end up in a weird spot. I was telling JP this earlier, where I get to the end and the last team I do
Well, that's what I was saying last show. Like then
Yeah.
you have the Bills at 0-17.
Yeah, I get to Buffalo Bills and they go like 6-11. I'm like, well, that's not right. So I do feel pretty good about this Falcons team. Like I said, I am pretty high on what the pieces they added to the secondary. I do really like Watts out of Notre Dame. I thought he could have been like a low end first round pick, upper second. I don't remember exactly where he got drafted.
He was in the third
round. So I think
not
that
third.
Doesn't have the physical profile.
Yeah. But I don't know if I'm as high on. Oh, this is interesting. I'm just looking at this. This depth chart has James Pierce as the second player behind Leonard Floyd.
Semantics.
So he wouldn't even. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. But they added some good pieces on defense, so we'll see how that goes. I feel pretty good about the Falcons this year.
Oh, you
I could see them going better than 8-9 for sure.
You weren't as high on, and then you pivoted.
Oh, sorry. I don't know Jalen Walker. I feel like he's another one of those really athletic freak Georgia players who didn't necessarily have the production at the college level, kind of like a Trayvon Walker. So we'll see how that translates to the NFL because for Trayvon Walker, it has not translated the best. So we'll see how that goes for him.
Yeah, I was really high on him.
No, you were very high on him. You kept praying he would fall to the Saints.
Yeah, and he did, but he was not selected. That's neither here nor there, though.
We'll get to that later.
I think a big thing for them is I don't trust, for one, the coaching staff, the organization itself. I don't like Raheem Morris as a head coach. I don't think he's good enough to lead this kind of team to, one, win a division, and two, have a winning record. He's just not that good of a coach. So it's going to be like a complete reliance, I think, on Michael Penix just becoming a star immediately, which through his 3 games, there were great moments, but I don't know if we can outright say that immediately that he's going to be that, especially this year in his first year fully in the system,
Sure,
playing through a full season. Perhaps next year we'll see how that goes. I'm actually not going to be surprised, for one, if Penix gets hurt, but I think there's a chance.
Is that our first injury prediction?
No, I wouldn't say it's an injury prediction. I think Kirk Cousins is going to start a game, if not 2 or 3 this season for the Falcons. I think they're going to get in a spot where they might be forced. Their hand might be forced by the fan base, by the organization. Like, I have them starting 1-5, and that's completely possible to be in a spot where they play 3 primetime games in those first 7 weeks, and that's putting Penix on national television. Week 2, they're playing at Minnesota on Sunday Night Football. That's comparing Penix versus J.J. McCarthy. Are we going to see what we saw in the national championship again? Who's actually better? Buffalo on Sunday Night Football at home. Like, that's a pivotal game. I can speak for Falcons fans and that city. Like, the Sunday night game when Kansas City was in Atlanta last year, and you had the pass interference that wasn't called, and it was bogus. But that game, losing that game, like, my friends were at that game, and they can tell you, like, that was a huge, like, just hurt and hole to that team, to that fan base, to that stadium that night. And that's completely possible to happen again with Buffalo coming to town on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah.
And then if Penix gets exposed by the San Francisco defense on Monday Night Football, like, we're in a spot where I think Kirk Cousins could easily replace him way too early, in my opinion, because, I mean, that's just a brutal schedule to start the season playing. What is that? That's 4 playoff teams, and the one that's not is San Francisco. The other one's Carolina. So, like, that's a tough schedule to start the season, and so it very easily could go south. If they were to come out of that start of the season at 3-3, they're in a spot where it's win the division, or, like, what happened? It was a catastrophe, because the end of their regular season, their last 9-10 games are pretty easy. I mean, it's teams like the Colts, the Panthers, New Orleans twice, the Jets, Seattle, Arizona. Like, they're in a spot where, like, if they can survive the first 7 weeks, they're going to be in a great spot to win the division. But Sandra, if you can tell me what the second word on that page is next to Atlanta.
It says Falcons.
Yeah, they're the Falcons. So the Falcons are going to Falcon. So, sorry, man. Falcons lie down, not rise up. That's their thing.
The Falcons rise up. That's their thing.
Falcons rise up. Yeah. Samuel L. Jackson used to come on the Georgia Dome, and he'd be like, "Get loud, Falcons fans! Falcons, we gonna rise up." Stuff like that. It was cool.
Yeah.
As a kid, it was cool. But
That's tough.
The Falcons lie down, unfortunately. But that kind of closes out the Atlanta Falcons for me. If y'all have any extra thoughts.
No, we're done.
No, I mean,
Any disagreements on Kirk Cousins starting with being a Penix guy?
I don't. I mean, fan bases are fickle things. I think the Atlanta fan base is pretty out on Kirk Cousins, so I'm not sure it'd be a fan base forcing back into it. I think it's way more likely he gets injured than gets benched for poor play just because of the injury history with the guy. I mean, there's a reason he just now got into the NFL, and it's because he couldn't stay healthy in college. So